Stalking through the underbrush, the Hunter Conclave is built for the kill. With a litany of features designed to take down even the toughest foes, this subclass is a killing machine. Perfect for new players, despite being one of the oldest ranger subclasses, there are still many reasons to play a hunter. This video is based on my personal experiences. I will not be going over basic subclass information. Y'all can probably read. I've played or DM'd for all the ranger subclasses. My opinions probably do not align with the D&D community at large. I'm going to be giving my rankings for each subclass based on 5 criteria: role-playing potential, combat, spells, utility, and X factor. Each ranger subclass feature can gain 20 points in each category. However, the later in level a class feature is gotten, the more heavily it will be scrutinized. Since most parties never reach 10th level, abilities that come online after 10th level won't be given as much weight. Alright, let's get to the video. I think one of the biggest selling points for this subclass is that it's great for new ranger players. The hunter has simple and direct gameplay: attack, kill your enemies. You don't have any new mechanics that you have to learn for the subclass. So if you have a player who's just getting into D&D and tabletop RPGs in general, the hunter is perfect. But also, the hunter is very combat focused. I'd argue that even after all these years, the hunter is one of the best combat subclasses that a ranger can take. This is because every hunter subclass feature is combat oriented. Every time you're leveling up this subclass, you're getting a new way to deal damage and your choice of how to deal that damage. This subclass provides you 3 different paths to level up your damage. The first is primary target damage, built around attacking a single target. The second, area of effect damage, built around attacking multiple targets. And then you have this weird counterattack / gimmick route. This route is all about turning the tables on your prey. So if we look at the 3rd level ability, Hunter's Prey, we can see that Colossus Slayer is a primary target feature. It's built around doing more damage to a single large enemy. Giant Slayer with its reaction attack goes down the counterattack avenue. And finally we have Horde Breaker, which goes down the AoE avenue. You're trying to attack multiple enemies. As you can see, you have a lot of choice for how you're going to build your hunter, which I think is another strength of this subclass. You build your hunter your way. Every single time you level up, you have an option about how you're going to mold that feature for your hunter. Often in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, you don't make a lot of choices for your character after level 3. Unless you're multiclassing, your character is mostly on this set track for what they're gonna get. This is not true with the hunter, and it feels like a breath of fresh air. Finally, when we're talking about this subclass, we have to discuss how this might be the best martial AoE in all of 5th edition. Options like Hordebreaker, Volley, and Whirlwind Attack are all good AoE that other classes couldn't dream of. Dealing with large groups of enemies is something that many martials struggle with. If you choose the AoE options for your hunter, you will not struggle with large groups of enemies. And it's for this reason that the hunter occupies a very unique role in 5th edition. If your party doesn't have another character that can handle the AoE role, try going with a hunter ranger. Building your hunter with large groups of enemies in mind can unlock a very unique playstyle. Picking up options like Hordebreaker, multi-attack defense, and Volley can allow you to mow down huge groups of enemies while not hitting your friends. This is something normally reserved for things like the Evocation Wizard, but with the Hunter subclass, you can do it too. But now that we have the benefits of this subclass out of the way, let's start talking about the concepts behind it. And the concept of a hunter is very simple. It's in the name, Hunter. The Hunter Conclave is all about tracking and dispatching threats to civilization in the wilderness. So when you're building your hunter, think about what creatures might be your specialty. What are you hunting on a regular basis? Talk to your DM about what previous history you might have hunting the monsters in your region. Then you can use that to influence which options you take during level ups. Let's say you used to hunt goblins, well, you might take Hordebreaker. If you dealt with Onkegs in your local region, Giant Killer might be your feature of choice. Also, consider why you dedicated yourself to hunting monsters. What happened in your backstory to cause you to go down this path? And if possible, I would suggest you try and go beyond monsters killed my whole family. It's something you can do, but it has been done to death. Maybe you had an experience with one of these creatures that caused you so much fear that you took up the mantle as a hunter to fight them. I had a hunter once write a backstory that they saw a group of displacer beasts trap a town in an illusion. They were worried that the monsters were growing smarter and would one day destroy the civilized area. The monsters scared them so deeply that they took up the mantle of the ranger and became a hunter. Or perhaps you need something from these monsters. The definition of a hunter is someone who hunts animals for sport, food, or materials. Perhaps in order to save a sick relative or friend, you need to collect rare monster ingredients. And these are just ideas for you, but I highly suggest you really think about why you are hunting the creatures you are. Why are you a ranger and not a beastmaster or a gloomstalker or a fey wanderer? Why have you solely dedicated yourself to hunting these creatures? Next up though, we can move on to multi-classing, and I would highly recommend multi-classing your hunter. We will talk about this in greater depth later, but the hunter lacks new spells and utility. So to fix this, you can multi-class into either a cleric or a druid. Both of these classes offer more spells and utility for just a 1 level dip. You can pick up cantrips like Guidance or Mending, or first level spells like Detect Magic, Healing Word, or Charm Person. If you go ahead and choose a cleric, you also get access to any one of their subclasses. Of course, you have the usual fantastic cleric subclasses like Order Domain or Peace Domain or Twilight Domain, but two highly underrated options are the Arcana Domain and the War Domain cleric. The Arcana Domain is going to get you a ton of fantastic spells like Detect Magic, Magic Missile, and multiple wizard cantrips. That means you can pick up fantastic cantrips like Mage Hand. Or if you go with the War Domain, you can pick up Heavy Armor and War Priest. A number of times equal to your Wisdom modifier. When you take the attack action, you can make another weapon attack as a bonus action. During boss fights, this is a fantastic emergency button to hit to increase your damage output. Then if you go one more level into Cleric, you can get the Channel Divinity for each one of these domains. In particular, the War Domain's Guided Strike pairs so well with the Ranger, particularly if you picked up the Ranger's favorite feat, Sharpshooter. But also you have the possibility to go into the Druid class. And if you are going Druid over Cleric, I would recommend going 2 levels into Druid. That way you can pick up a Druid subclass and gain access to Wild Shape. I would personally recommend picking up Circle of Stars for any hunter. This is because of the starry form that this Druid subclass gives you access to. You use this in place of your Wild Shape in combat and gives you access to more damage, better concentration checks, or more healing. But really you can choose any one of the Druid circles and be far more effective with them. And that's partially because of some of the deficiencies that the Hunter subclass has. So let's talk about those now. The biggest thing any new player has to overcome when they choose this subclass is the lack of spells. The Hunter subclass was released right at the very start of 5th edition, and this was before every Ranger subclass got access to new spells. Nowadays, we really feel this lack of new spells. While many other Hunter subclasses are getting up to 10 new spells, the Hunter is not getting anything. These days, during my home games, I tell my players that they can take 2 extra Druid spells at designated levels. That does help to alleviate the problem. However, base, the Hunter does feel this lack of spells. And they feel this lack of spells in their lack of utility. You see, the Hunter knows what it is to a fault, a combat subclass. But the problem with that is that other Ranger subclasses aren't just one thing. To be a great Ranger subclass in modern 5th edition, you have to be great across the board. The Hunter has barely any utility. The only feature that could be conceivably said as utility are things like the Steel Will option or Evasion. However, those aren't enough, and you have to give up other fantastic options to take them. Where other Ranger subclasses can fall back on the utility provided by their extra spells, the Hunter has none. Thankfully, these days with the revised Ranger, I still think in modern day 5th edition that you can have a great deal of fun with this subclass, but players should know where it is lacking. And with all this in mind, let's get to the ratings. For those of you that haven't done this before, we have 5 categories: role-playing, combat, spells, utility, and X Factor. X Factor is what makes the subclass feel and act different than other Ranger subclasses. We have everything ranked on a scale from 0 to 20. So beginning with the role-playing category, I'm giving the Hunter a 17 out of 20. I think the role-playing concept of a Hunter is very solid. It usually gets players in the right state of mind for playing this character. However, I would have liked to see this subclass give a bit more guidance for what a Hunter actually is, and I think this subclass is also partially let down mechanically by not having any utility tracking options. Additionally, when Wizards of the Coast released the Monster Slayer, they kind of infringed on the hunter's niche a little bit, so I think the overall concept has gotten a little bit muddled over the years. Still though, it's a strong concept for new players, so 17 out of 20. Moving on to combat, I'm giving this a 19 out of 20. That might seem a little bit high to some of you, but the hunter is very effective in combat. Also, because of the adaptability of this subclass, it can fit any campaign. Whether you need a primary single target damage dealer or an AoE damage dealer, the hunter can fit that role. Also, I just have to come out and say that the hunter can deal very competitive damage. Stacking Favored Foe with Colossus Slayer and Sharpshooter makes for some insane damage numbers. Heck, stacking Sharpshooter with almost any attack buff the hunter gets is great. So for all these reasons, I'm super confident in giving this subclass a 19 out of 20. I think this is one of the best hunter subclasses of all time in combat. But then I have to turn around and give this subclass a 0 in spellcasting, because obviously you get nothing in terms of spellcasting buffs. You are only weapon combat focused, you have no interest in spells. And I have to kind of do the same thing to utility, where I'm giving this subclass a 3 out of 20. Once again, this subclass is just barren to anything not revolving around combat. The 3 points I am willing to give this section is just because of the smallest shred of possible utility in some of these options. But like, seriously, have any one of you ever chosen Steel Will under the defensive tactics feature? Leave your answer in the comments below and tell me, was it worth it? Because after seeing 5 hunters take this feature, none of them have even thought about Steel Will for half a second. Finally though, we can discuss the X Factor, and I'm giving this a 15 out of 20. I really like that there are options at each level for this subclass. It makes your hunter feel very customizable. Plus, the different features significantly change the play patterns of the hunter. I'm playing a hunter who takes Hordebreaker very differently than I'm playing a hunter who takes Giant Killer. For this reason, the hunter subclass constantly feels fresh when I'm running for it. And usually when I play a subclass as a player, I'm not raring to play that subclass again. I've seen what it can do and I'm ready to move on to the next option. After I played the hunter for a one-shot, I actually wanted to play this subclass again. I wanted to try more combinations of these options, which I think is sadly a little unique in 5th edition D&D. The reason why this X Factor is being held back is because, of course, they did nothing with utility or spell casting. Give me utility options, give me spell casting options. And I'm not blaming the designers here. This subclass was put out at the very start of 5th edition. But I have to judge the subclass by modern day standards. So for that reason, after tallying up all the points, we have a final score of 54 out of 100. In modern day 5th edition, the hunter is the baseline ranger subclass. But I don't think that 54 out of 100 is a bad score at all. In fact, if you make the total out of 60 and only look at what the hunter does in combat, it's a 51 out of 60. This subclass is incredibly good when it's fighting. The Hunter Conclave knows what it's about. It wants to get into combat and wants to kill the enemies your way. I highly recommend this for someone just wanting to play a DPS Ranger or for someone who's just getting into D&D 5th edition. You get to hold your own in combat and explore the Ranger's basic spellcasting and utility features in your own time. But if you like this video, consider checking out this one right here. Also, if you haven't already, consider going and checking out my Patreon. I do offer one-on-one DM coaching, but spots are limited. And thank you for entering the dungeon.